An elegant brass plaque on the heavy glass door simply read, Layton's. And as Brooke Chandler, just 26 years old, stepped through it, she drew in a slow, steadying breath. This was, without a doubt, the most upscale restaurant she had ever set foot in. Crystal chandeliers glowed above like stars trapped in glass, casting warm golden light over snow-white linens. A soft chorus of hushed conversations blended gently with the occasional clink of polished silverware and fine china. Brooke clutched her small beige clutch tighter, feeling the weight of the 5 wrinkled dollar bills inside. That was her food budget for the entire week. She had tried 3 separate times to back out of this blind date, but her roommate and relentless best friend, Chelsea, had insisted, practically begged, claiming she'd finally found the one for her. Working 2 part-time jobs while chasing a teaching degree wasn't easy, and Brooke had gotten used to counting every penny. Rent was steep, textbooks even steeper. The soft cream sweater she wore had once belonged to her mom and only came out of the closet for occasions that felt bigger than life. Her plain black slacks were secondhand from a thrift shop in Midtown, but she hoped the outfit was polished enough to blend in with the crowd. "Do you have a reservation?" asked the impeccably groomed host, his voice courteous but just a touch skeptical. "Chandler. Party of 2, Brooke replied with as much poise as she could manage, masking the nervous flutter in her stomach. She was led to a small table near the tall window, where the glow of the streetlights outside painted streaks of amber across the glass. She sat down, placed her phone on the table, and glanced at the screen. No messages. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. After 20 minutes, her cheeks began to flush. Patrons at surrounding tables were beginning to notice the young woman sitting alone. Some spared her quick glances filled with curiosity or quiet pity. Others looked toward the entrance, expecting to see her companion walk in at any moment. Across the dining room, Graham Ellison, a 39-year-old CEO of Ellison Ventures, was enduring a dinner of his own, and not an easy one. The man seated across from him, Martin Prescott, was a shark of an investor. Sharp suit, sharper tongue. For the past hour, Martin had torn into Graham's company strategy, questioned his leadership style, and, most painfully, criticized his decision to remain a hands-on, full-time father. "You can't build an empire while playing Mr. Mom," Martin said dryly, swirling the last of his red wine. "Success doesn't favor sentimentality. It favors sacrifice. And that's what separates men like us from the crowd." Graham's jaw clenched. "My daughter doesn't distract me from success. She's the reason for it." Martin chuckled, dismissive. "Keep telling yourself that. You want legacy? Then stop changing diapers and skipping board meetings for ballet recitals." While Martin kept talking, Graham's gaze shifted past him, drawn to the girl by the window. He had seen her when she came in. Not because she was stunningly beautiful, though she was, but because of the way she had smoothed her sweater and checked her reflection in the glass with quiet resolve. There had been something honest in that moment. Something real. Now, nearly an hour later, she was still sitting alone. No wine. No appetizer. Just a glass of water and a fading expression of hope. When the waiter approached her table for the 4th time, his smile was no longer effortless. "Miss, are you sure you wouldn't like to order something while you wait? Perhaps a small plate?" he asked gently. Brooke glanced at the menu she had been carefully avoiding all evening. The cheapest item was a salad priced at $12, more than double what she could afford. "Just the water, thank you," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm sure he'll be here any minute." But 15 more minutes passed. Her phone screen remained empty. And with a quiet sigh, Brooke accepted the truth. She'd been stood up. The shame of it pressed down on her like a heavy coat. Here she was, a broke student in a high-end restaurant, hoping for something she knew deep down she couldn't afford, emotionally or financially. She reached for her bag and stood, determined to leave with whatever grace she had left. She turned to go, but nearly collided with a waiter carrying a covered dish. "Miss Chandler," he said with a kind smile, "your dinner." Brooke blinked in confusion. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. I didn't order anything." "No mistake," the waiter assured her. "The gentleman at table 12 has taken care of it." He subtly gestured toward Graham's table. "He asked me to pass along a message," the waiter said softly, placing a covered dish gently on the table. "He says no beautiful woman should have to eat alone." Brooke turned her head in the direction the waiter gestured and found herself locked in the gaze of the warmest brown eyes she had ever seen. Graham Ellison sat calmly, watching her with an expression that was both kind and quietly reassuring. He looked to be in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, with dark hair that was tastefully streaked with silver at the temples. His face carried the wear of experience, but it was handsome in a way that came from character, not just symmetry. Across from him, the older man, the one he had been dining with earlier, now looked visibly annoyed, his body tense, his jaw set. Graham, on the other hand, raised his glass slightly in her direction, offering a faint, almost shy smile that barely touched the corners of his mouth. Brooke's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and gratitude. "I can't accept this," she whispered to the waiter, her voice wavering. "I don't even know him." "He anticipated that," the waiter replied with a practiced smile. "He asked me to tell you that good gestures should never be rejected, especially when they come without strings or expectations." Beneath the silver lid, the plate held a perfectly seared piece of salmon resting on a bed of roasted vegetables. Elegant. Simple. Not overly extravagant, but more than Brooke could have ever justified spending on herself. She looked around again and saw Graham had turned his attention back to his tablemate, but not before offering her another gentle nod, not pushing, just a quiet signal of kindness. For a moment, her pride told her to stand up and walk away. She hadn't come here looking for charity. But her stomach, still echoing the long day of skipped meals and double shifts, urged her to sit back down. She had not eaten anything since breakfast. And something in his gesture, something in him, didn't feel condescending. It felt sincere. Not pity, but understanding. Brooke slowly sat down again, offered a soft, grateful nod in Graham's direction, and lifted her napkin onto her lap. He gave a barely noticeable smile and returned to his conversation, never once stealing a glance back at her. The food was phenomenal, moist, flavorful, perfectly seasoned, but she could hardly taste it. Her mind was running laps around the stranger who had stepped in and saved her from a humiliating evening. She wondered about his story, what kind of man quietly rescues someone like that without expecting anything in return. As she ate, bits of conversation drifted from Graham's table, not because she was eavesdropping but because the older man across from him had grown increasingly agitated and loud. "This is exactly what I mean, Ellison," the man snapped, slapping a hand lightly on the table for emphasis. "Throwing your money at strangers. Getting distracted by every sob story that wanders past your line of sight. How are you ever going to build a legacy if you're always playing Good Samaritan?" Graham didn't raise his voice. He didn't even flinch. "Maybe," he said quietly, "I don't want to build the kind of legacy that demands I ignore basic human decency." "Decency doesn't earn dividends," the man shot back. "And it sure as hell doesn't impress serious investors." "Then maybe you're not the kind of investor I want involved with my company," Graham said, calm but firm. Brooke paused mid-bite. She watched the older man's face grow flushed with fury. "You're making a mistake, Ellison," he hissed. "I could have made you a very wealthy man." "I already am wealthy," Graham replied simply. "I have a daughter who respects me, a team that trusts me, and I sleep soundly at night knowing I haven't traded my values for a bigger profit margin." The man stood abruptly, tossed his napkin onto the table with a huff, and grabbed his coat. "You'll regret this. When you're struggling to scale, when your competitors start leaving you in the dust, you'll remember tonight." "I will," Graham said without blinking. "And I'll be grateful that I chose integrity over your money." With that, the man stormed out, leaving behind a trail of indignation and a very quiet dining room. Graham sat still for a moment, exhaling slowly, the weight of the confrontation settling across his shoulders. His business advisor would no doubt call this a catastrophic misstep. Expansion plans might stall. Investors like Prescott were rare and hard to replace. But when his eyes drifted back across the room and met Brooke's again, her plate nearly empty, her posture relaxed now, something inside him eased. Not every return came in numbers. Some came in peace. Brooke motioned for the check, intent on at least paying for her water. But the waiter returned with a soft grin and shook his head. "The gentleman has taken care of everything," he said, "including the tip." She blinked in disbelief and turned her head just in time to see Graham gathering his things. Without thinking, she stood, walked briskly to his table, and stopped just beside him. "Excuse me," she said quietly, her voice trembling just enough to betray her nerves. "I just wanted to thank you for the dinner. That was incredibly kind of you." Up close, Graham's presence was even more striking. He wasn't flashy or polished like a magazine model. But there was something grounding in the way he carried himself, like solid oak in a world full of plastic. "It was my pleasure," he said sincerely, standing as well. "I hope your night improved." "It did," Brooke nodded. "Because of you." He smiled, then tilted his head slightly. "May I ask something?" "Of course," she said. "Why does it surprise you so much that someone might want to do something nice for you?" She hesitated, unsure how to respond. "I don't know," she admitted. "I guess I'm just not used to it." "Well," he said gently, "maybe that should change." Graham paused for a moment, his gaze drifting slightly as he considered how to explain something so personal. "2 years ago," he began quietly, "I was having dinner with my daughter at a small family diner. She was 7 at the time. At the next table, there was a woman crying because her credit card had been declined. She couldn't pay for the meals she just ordered for her 2 kids. He paused, eyes growing distant, lost for a second in the memory. My daughter noticed and asked me why I wasn't helping. I didn't have a good answer. So I handed her some money and told her to give it to the woman herself. Afterward, she looked up at me and asked, "Daddy, are people supposed to help other people when they need it?" His voice softened. I told her, "Yes. That's exactly what we're supposed to do." Brooke felt a sudden lump rise in her throat. Something about the simplicity of the moment, the sincerity of his story, it tugged hard at something inside her. Graham continued, "So tonight, when I saw you sitting there alone, not ordering anything, I heard her voice in my head again, asking what I planned to do about it." Brooke blinked back tears. There was no dramatics in his words, just quiet truth. "Your daughter sounds like an incredible girl," she said gently. "She is," he replied, a smile breaking through his otherwise steady expression. "She reminds me every day that success isn't about how much you have, but what kind of person you become." He laughed softly. "In fact, she just cost me a pretty big investment deal tonight." Brooke offered a small smile. "I caught parts of that conversation. The man sitting with you, he didn't seem like a very kind person." "No, he wasn't," Graham admitted. "And walking away from his offer? Best business decision I've made in months." He extended his hand. "Graham Ellison." "Brooke Chandler," she replied, shaking his hand. A subtle jolt passed between them, not fireworks or thunder, just the unmistakable recognition of something real. "And I will pay you back for that dinner." "No chance," he said, gently but firmly. "But I'll make you a deal." She raised an eyebrow, curious. "Let me take you to dinner, a real one. No investment sharks, no pity invites. Just us. I'd like to actually talk to the woman who sat through an hour of embarrassment with more grace than I've seen in most boardrooms." Brooke looked into his eyes. In them she found nothing but honesty. And maybe, just maybe, a little hope. "I'd like that," she heard herself say. As they walked out of Layton's together, Brooke couldn't help but marvel at how the night had unfolded. She had come there expecting to meet some stranger her friend thought would be her perfect match. Instead, she met someone who seemed perfect in a way she never even imagined. Someone who saw value not just in her appearance or accomplishments, but in how she carried herself through hard moments. 6 months later, Brooke found herself seated at a warm wooden kitchen table, helping Sophie, Graham's daughter, finish a science worksheet while the smell of garlic and butter filled the room from the stovetop. Graham was wearing an apron, laughing at himself for mixing up oregano and parsley. The little girl who had inspired her father's kindness had quickly become Brooke's biggest ally, and a source of unexpected joy. She had finally found someone to braid hair with, paint shoebox dioramas for school, and giggle over glitter glue. Sophie made her feel like she belonged in a way no job or diploma ever had. And that diploma? Brooke finally earned it, thanks to a scholarship she never applied for, quietly created by Graham under a foundation he had set up to help financially struggling students. Not just for Brooke, but for others like her who just needed one break, one person to believe in them. As for Graham, he found something he hadn't been looking for, a partner. Not just a romantic partner, but a true equal. Someone who valued character over currency. Someone who saw his role as a father not as a burden, but as proof of his strength to love, deeply and openly. Together, they learned that not all investments are financial, and the best returns are often measured in trust, laughter, and everyday moments. Each year, on their anniversary, they returned to the same table at Layton's, table 12. Sophie would roll her eyes at the story she had heard 100 times before, but she would still listen with a smile as Graham told it again. How a $5 blind date that never happened turned into the most meaningful moment of his life. They had built something real. Not on wealth. Not on convenience. But on kindness. The kind that asks nothing in return. The kind that holds doors open, picks up the check quietly, and shows up in unexpected ways. Sometimes, the greatest love stories do not start with grand gestures, but with a quiet meal, gifted by a stranger, at exactly the right moment. And sometimes, the person you're meant to meet is not the one you're waiting for, but the one already watching you from across the room, ready to prove that good still exists, just because it should. Enjoyed the story? Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next one.